Give Hi, everybody, and welcome to Dave Emmons and the Strange Reality. And I'm really proud having a guest that I got on tonight. He's a military guy. He's been in the military for some time. He was an officer, and he knows quite a bit about some UFO events. There's certain things we won't go into. I was talking to him about some of my background, and we went into some of that, the things that's happened to me in the past month, but we won't go into that at this time either. But I wanted to tell you who I've got. He's been on TikTok, and he's gotten, I think, 1 million views already, and he's coming out with this AI, 3 AI atlas. I guess he broke it down into chemical and the not biological, but chemical form of this ship, or whatever it is, a comet. Let's call it a comet. But interesting, it's coming around the sun right now, and there'll be more information on this in the next couple of days. But my guest, and you probably know him already, he's been all over already, Dr. Gregory Rogers, and he's with the board of directors. His professional background is graduated from medical school, Oklahoma State University, College of Osteopathic Medicine in 1983, served in West Germany as a flight surgeon for the U.S. Army. He had private practice for 2 years in the state of Washington, served in Florida as the chief of aerospace medicine, and he got space wings there, and he worked at Patrick Air Force Base in Cape Canaveral. So he got to meet quite a few interesting people, astronauts, and things of that nature. Maybe you might mention some of his most,
Sure.
some of his most, I guess, best meetings that he's had that
Yeah,
really,
those were definitely some of the most interesting people I've ever met.
really, wow. Did they tell you?
Well, yeah, when you talk to guys like Buzz Aldrin, who walked on the moon
Yeah,
uh, on the first space shuttle mission, or this first space mission to the moon, Apollo 11, and then you talk to guys like Fred Hayes and Jim Lovell from Apollo 13. But also the guys I was working with were the ones launching the Hubble Space Telescope and then having to go do the repair on it.
wow.
So you know, uh, working with the space program was, sort of the highlight of my career.
Yeah, Aerospace Medicine Advanced Air Force Base, and from 1994 to 95. So you did that. So you got around quite a bit. I mean, in the service, I guess you went in and out. You went in civilian life and did a private practice, but you worked in emergency departments, private practice, served as medical director at McAllister Army Ammunition Plant, 2011 until your retirement in 2025. You just retired. Major military courses, aviation medicine, Rucker, Alabama, and military indoctrination for medical services officers, and as Shepherd Air Force Base, U.S. Navy Walter it's water survival course, and you've done U.S. Air Force water survival. Of course, you had to know all that with being in the aerospace industry and working with Cape Canaveral and aerospace medicine. Nassau Flight Surgeon Certified Course and Space Center, Texas, Space Operations Orientation Course, Cape Canaveral. I'm reading all this off because I'm awfully proud of you, Doctor, that the work that you've done
Okay.
and the things that you've done. It's very impressive. I'm a military guy myself. I didn't serve as long as you, and I didn't get as high as rank as you, but I was getting there. But I just didn't want to go back to combat. But you worked at Holloman Air Force Base, and you were in training courses at Luke Air Force Base, Arizona. Probably saw some stuff there. U.S. Army Occupational Medicine. Dr. Rogers served in the United States Department of Defense, DoD, both on active duty and civilian employee for more than 2 decades. And he supported both manned and unmanned space launches for Cape Canaveral Air Force in the Kennedy Space Center. Quite an impressive resume. I guess I can go on another page, but I'll let you do some of the talking. Some of the most exciting experiences that you've had. That sounds very interesting,
Yeah.
Doctor Rogers.
Yeah, that resume goes on for about 6 pages.
Yeah, I know. I got about three, and I thought maybe I'd read off a lot of this, and I did, but I just wanted people to know where you're coming from and your experience
Okay.
and what's going on, and this is very important that I get that out. But Dr. Rogers, thank you for being on the show. I'm really glad to get you on the show. I think we kind of
Glad to be here.
tied together an IMEX or CMEX, Dr. Federico Liddell, and
Yes.
I work with them and kind of working, doing some promos with them and actually putting in some mechanical work with the scientists there, because I'm an experiencer and I call myself actually an unknowing participant in ETs. So that's my newest, I guess, gig. I call it, instead of a contactee or whatever. Dr. Rogers, could you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing lately and what's on the top of
Oh,
your mind?
okay. Well, speaking of IMEX, Dr. Federico, um, I have an article that is about to come out that is going to be very influential. It's going to be associated with Melissa Madrigal from the International UFO Bureau,
Mm-hmm.
but also it's working with the experimentation personnel down there. And we're going to be looking at extra low frequency and very low frequency signals because of some very curious things that we have found. So it's going to be like a 6-page article that they are about to release, and it is really interesting about what it involves because the very low frequency and extremely low frequency um, realms are things that very few people involve. And when UFO researchers go looking for UAP signatures and so forth, they're usually looking in the radio frequency, microwave, and all of these kinds of areas. But we have found a potential signal at 5.04 hertz, not kilohertz or megahertz,
Mm-hmm.
5.04 hertz,
Wow.
which is very low frequency. Well, things of this sort are usually associated with things like earthquakes and tectonic plates and all of this sort of stuff. However, it is also the very kinds of frequencies that are used by the military, especially the US Navy, in communication with their submarines underwater.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, I don't want to get ahead of the paper that we're going to be publishing from Mexico City, but I think it's extremely interesting when you look at the very long wavelengths that are incurred with extra low frequency and very low frequency uh, uh, waves like this, wavelengths. And uh, uh, this is something I didn't put in the the article, but if we are using it to signal, and whales use very low frequency um, wavelengths to talk to each other, and their whale songs can travel around the world. If this again, this is not in the article, and we're not backing it up with any data that is already there. But if UAPs go underwater, they're USOs,
Mm-hmm.
underwater submergible
Right.
objects. When they're underwater, communications become very difficult because high frequency signals get disrupted in the ocean. Very low frequencies and extra low frequencies travel much farther, much better, and more accurately. Now, then, if we also think that there is a potential that UAP bases would be, say, on the bottom of the ocean, uh, using high frequency signals would not reach them. But using extra low frequencies might be one method that they would use to communicate. And while I didn't put that in the paper, I think the paper is going to be very significant within the UAP community.
Yeah, I'd be looking forward to that because you have some interesting information. Uh, Now, the towels hum. I know you've heard of the hum, and only certain
Yes.
people can hear it. Well, I hear that hum, but I also told you about an event, and we don't want to get into it. But I heard I had this low frequency in my car. Okay, we won't say no more, but that's I. But you can't hear it, right? You can't hear the frequency you're talking about, right, Doctor?
Uh, it might be barely perceptible to some people, but it is generally going to be of such low frequency that normal human hearing would be unable to detect it, even though you might be able to sense the energy.
Yeah.
But again, that's not something that I put into the paper. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't include in the paper, but I think the information that is in the paper when it's released from Mexico City is going to be something that an awful lot of UAP researchers will need to review and study.
That's and I guess I'll get a chance to see that paper because I'll get a copy of that IMEX report. I guess from Dr. Federico. Interested in that because I've heard this low hum for a while, and I'm trying to equate. Uh, you said something about microwaves. Is it a part is it microwave that makes that low frequency, Doctor?
Oh no, microwaves are much higher energy.
Really?
The energy to produce waves is dependent upon the amount of energy that is produced, uh, per second.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about hertz, what we're talking about is the number of wavelengths per second. So if it's kilohertz, that means 1,000 wavelengths per second. Well, if it takes this much energy to make 1,000 waves per second, think of how much energy it takes to make megahertz, a
Mm-hmm.
million
Yeah.
waves per second. So that energy is going to be extremely higher. And so along the entire electromagnetic spectrum, the more energy, the higher the frequency is going to be. So the higher you go, uh, if you get into gigahertz, uh, you're you're talking about such high energy levels that uh, they would be difficult to transmit effectively, and so there are problems associated with that. But anytime you talk about that much energy, what you're going to be talking about is you're going to disturb the atmosphere through which you're sending the signals.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very complicated uh, uh, thing, but uh,
Is this frequency bad for human beings if they're in it
well,
for a long period of
yes.
time?
Well, you were talking about microwaves. Let me give you an example. I had to go talk to my guards when I was in Germany because when it's very, very cold outside, uh, they figured out that if you stand in front of the um, the radars are emitting energy, and so that energy, as it passes through you, will warm you. The only thing is, if it's a microwave radar, you're basically microwaving yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So, the thing circulates, comes back, and it hits you again. So it temporarily warms you, but it warms you because you're basically standing in a microwave oven. And when you're freezing your toes off, um, people may tell you don't stand in front of the radar, but if it's warmer in front of the radar, they'll stand there.
Oh, wow.
But that's a very bad idea. But that's the kind of thing that really happens, and I had to deal with that with some of our guards.
I was wondering if
So
I was talking to you earlier about these frequencies, especially low frequencies. They can disrupt your blood count. I mentioned red blood count and white blood count. You said the white cell is harder to, I guess, to exact or to measure because it's probably hidden into the body a lot. But the red cells are is like I guess I was in Alamos. It was 7,800 feet high. I mean atmosphere. From the ground level, and it was high altitude, and I got kind of altitude sickness from that. And
okay, well, you're talking about several completely different things.
okay.
So we need to separate those out. Let's go for the white blood cells, for
Mhm.
instance. The amount of white blood cells that are circulating in the bloodstream at any given moment are not indicative of the total number of white blood cells in your body. Your spleen carries extra white blood cells as a reserve, and so you circulate a certain amount of them. But if your body gets into an infectious disease, into a stressful area, uh, your body has extra white blood cells that it can sort of dump into your bloodstream so that you can temporarily cope with an abnormal situation. So uh, when if you do a white blood count on a person in a quiet room with nothing going on, and then you have them come back the next day, you put them under great stress. You do all kinds of things to stimulate their body, and you draw a white blood count again. Uh, when you are under stress, that white blood count is going to go up. It's not that your body made more white blood cells all of a sudden. It's just that it put more of them into the system. And when it puts it into the circulatory system and you take a blood count, you're going to see the amount of white blood cells per volume that will increase.
Right. I
So,
must have packaged that question a little bit. I had a large package on that question, but the I guess what I'm saying is radar, microwave, and also frequencies can have an effect on the body. That's what I'm basically,
oh,
I guess, saying.
sure. Uh, Heat in the form of infrared energy is having an effect on the body. If it's cold, uh, your body it does not possess as much infrared energy. As you warm yourself up, you stand next to a furnace. Uh, your body can absorb the energy from the furnace and transmit it uh, through your circulatory system and through your musculoskeletal system. And if somebody is looking at you with a forward looking infrared, for instance, when you're colder, you're going to look blue.
Hmm.
As you get warmer, you're going to look red. And that's because of the amount of infrared energy your body is radiating.
Yeah. Now, you worked with astronauts. They have a problem with radiation, I guess, in space. That's one of their big, Dr. Rogers, what they have to deal with.
Yes, well, radiation is always a problem. Um, Anytime you get e- e- even for our pilots who are flying at very high altitudes, like the U-2 pilots, when you're getting above the Earth's atmosphere, the protective measures against solar radiation, cosmic radiation, and so forth does not protect you as well. So if you go further out into space and there is less of the Earth's atmosphere to protect you, you're going to be more exposed to radiation.
Hmm.
And then if you go further out, there are areas where ionizing radiation are kept within belts, and so those are called the Van Allen belts. There's um, uh, more than one belt One of the things that some people say about, oh, well, we couldn't have gone to the moon because the astronauts would have died in the Van Allen belts. Well, uh, the way we got around that was to not send the Apollo astronauts through the middle of the Van Allen belts.
Mm-hmm.
As we launched them, uh, uh, they're in a shape sort of like this. If you launch straight through it, you're going to go through the greatest amount of radiation. But if you launch around the edge of it, you're going to keep that radiation level very low. So NASA specifically addressed the trajectory of the route to the moon so that we would avoid the worst sections of the Van Allen belts.
That's the night.
There's also an area over the South Atlantic Ocean called the South Atlantic Anomaly.
Right.
There's no good explanation for it, but it's like this band of radiation over the South Atlantic Ocean. We try not to have astronauts do spacewalks when they're traversing the South Atlantic Anomaly, because if they're outside the spacecraft while they're doing a spacewalk, um, they will receive a higher level of ionizing radiation dose than if you uh, do the same spacewalk in another uh, area of the Earth's atmosphere that does not have uh, the same radiation levels as what you see in the South Atlantic anomaly.
Mm-hmm. Uh, let's get to, I guess, Dr. Rogers. I'm going to read this off. I know you talked about this in the past. This, what you saw, this 20-foot wide flying saucer emblazoned with a U.S. Air Force logo, and you saw this something like more than 30 years ago. And you were former Nassau Chief Flight Surgeon Air Force Major Course, and your testimony was on 1992 event and recently uptick in whistleblowers in the military community on the secretive projects investigating, recovering, and perhaps crafting anomalies flying objects, according to the Daily Mail. Let's not go in the past, like you said. You talked about this a lot, but what's going on in the whistleblower community right now, Dr. Rogers?
Well, uh, last Friday, I was on Gary Anderson's Night Dreams
Yeah.
network, and one of the things that happened was the first hour was given to Timothy Phillips, the former deputy director of Arrow. So he spent an hour describing all kinds of things that Arrow does, but giving all these reasons for why they don't believe UAPs exist. Then in the second hour, Gary asked me, have you ever uh, seen any of these things? And one of the things specifically denied by Arrow is that there are the presence of reverse engineered UAPs. Well, I immediately had to say, well, I disagree with him because in 1992, I saw one. So with me being able to say, well, you know,
Yeah.
you can say they don't exist, but I saw one in 1992. So here's my story. It was a 20-foot wide craft. It was pearly white. Um, it had special markings, which to me indicated that it was a test vehicle, probably being operated by contractors or subcontractors or contractor consortiums under the auspices of the U.S. Air Force, but not being operated by the U.S. Air Force. And so, even though on the craft it said U.S. Air Force and had U.S. flight insignias, that is very common. That if um, defense contractors are going to make a craft and it's going to be for the Air Force, they're going to put Air Force markings on it even before it is in the official Air Force inventory. And so I believe that was what I witnessed.
I've seen 6 of them up close, and I know a lot of people has heard me talk about these stories. But I saw the first one in 1963 with a friend of mine, and it was a saucer shape, kind of like a fat little saucer shape, 3 level. It was about 35 feet wide and probably about 22 feet high, about 70 feet off the ground. But that's the first one I saw, and that's what got me interested in UFOs. And that's why when you're talking about what you're talking about, and you're a man of experience here that can answer some of my questions, but I'm not going to ask you a lot of personal questions on this. But I've seen a TR-3B. They call it the triangle craft, the huge triangle. But I didn't call it a TR-3B. I called it an ET craft. It was huge. It covered 9 houses. It was so huge. That was back in 2011 when I saw that. Would they fly over neighborhoods, Dr. Rogers, any of these test vehicles that they have or test craft that they have? Would they fly like that?
Well, the whole key is what is a test craft and what is a real craft.
Yeah.
Now, then, we make test craft that are sort of based on things that we have seen or experienced. You know, when I asked the gentleman who was showing me the video of the craft that I saw, I said, "Where did we get this?" And he said, "We got it from them."
Okay.
Now, then, the craft I saw did not have the full capabilities of what a UAP craft could do. This one had a mast and it had umbilicals that were attached to it. So that made me believe there was probably an inadequate power source on the craft I saw. And so they were having to supply power from the outside. They may not have had full control mechanisms within the craft. And that's why they were having to use these other umbilicals to send the information into the craft so that they could operate it. But here's an example that I like to use. If we took an F-22 right now and we said, we are going to be able to send this back in time, we want to give it to the U.S. Aeronautical engineers in the year 1914, because the F-22 is greatly more advanced than anything they're going to fly in World War I.
Yeah.
So all we have to do is transfer this kind of technology back to our engineers in 1914, and we can defeat anything that we fly against in World War I. Now, then, the only problem is that when we give this technology to them, we're dealing with flight engineers from 1914. So they have a big understanding problem. Even though this is only 100 years of human technology, they're not going to understand it. So they look at the F-22 and the first thing they say is, where's the propeller? I don't see where the propeller is. So I don't see that this thing can fly. Now then, it looks pretty heavy. All of our aircraft have to be very light. We make them out of wood and cotton cloth and all that. But this looks like it's all made of metal. And we say, well, yes, it is special alloys of metal. And this gives them special flight characteristics. And they say, well, you know, even the surface doesn't feel right. Um, what is wrong with the surface when we put our hands on it? And we say, oh, that's radar absorbent material that will diffract radar signals so that they do not get sent back to the original source of the radar. And that's what reduces the radar cross section so that radars can't detect this crap. They're scratching their head saying, well, what's a radar?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even though this is only 100 years of human technology, the aeronautical engineers in 1914 cannot even comprehend the technology in the F-22. Yeah. Now, then, if they're going to try to reproduce it before 1918 at the end of the war, that ain't going to happen. They don't even know what computers are. Right. They don't understand anything about the flight dynamics. They don't understand what a jet engine is. They're going to have to try to learn what this aircraft is all about. And And that's going to be something that's going to take them years to even understand
Mm-hmm.
before they can even attempt to reverse engineer it.
Mm-hmm.
So we could give it to them then, and they're not going to have it reverse engineered by World War II. So if we are recovering vehicles that are thousands of years ahead of us in technology, even when we have some decades to try to reverse engineer it, we're going to have lots of problems trying to do it because we don't even understand the material science of the of what the craft is made of, much less how it functions, how it operates, and all of that kind of stuff. So we're going to be taking baby steps in trying to reproduce this vehicle for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
So if anybody thinks, yeah, just because we recovered a craft in 1947, by 1952, we're going to have a complete working prototype, that is completely um, the opposite of what would really happen because we can't comprehend the material science, the technology, the flight control elements, or anything else of what these people are doing with technology that are thousands of years ahead of us. Um, at in 1947, we could give them an F-22, and they still couldn't reproduce it in 1947.
Right. Uh, we we had a lot of whistleblowers at the congressional hearings, and some of these whistleblowers talked about that we had 7 or 8 craft that we've recovered, and they're working on those. And also, they had bodies. They had, ET bodies, uh, non-human entities. They called it, and they had their bodies. And did they have any live ones that you know of, Dr. Rogers? Plus, and what about all these craft they say they had? Do you think they've done anything about re-engineering or back engineering any of these?
Well, when I was working with the space shuttle, nobody briefed me on whether or not we had any non-human intelligence bodies. I
Mm.
mean, that wasn't what I was doing. I was helping to launch the space shuttle and take care of the astronauts.
Right.
So those kind of questions were not what we were dealing with at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station and Kennedy Space Center. Now, there were lots of advanced technologies that we were dealing with, and those are things that I could not discuss even today. Uh, the fact that I saw a reverse engineered craft, I can say yes, I saw it. But there are elements of um, possible functioning that there's no way I'm going to describe in any way, shape, or form, because if that was a prototype, they have made advances of the same kind of craft. And some of the information I might inadvertently disclose would give clues as to what the more advanced craft can do. So, you know, there's a big difference between what I can say in speculation and what I can say as a result of my military training.
Right. I've heard that the Werner von Braun showed Uri Geller. I got to be friends with Uri Geller. He's from Israel, and he's a magician, and so von Braun was fascinated by his work, and so he brought him to New Mexico there at the base where they had these bodies, and he asked me to do a couple of things. So he did a couple of tricks. He said, "I'm going to take you out to this bunker," and he said we have to put these coats on. So they put the coats on, and they went. He said, "Why do I have to have coats?" He said, "You'll see." They went into this big freezer, and there was 3 or 4 bodies, ET bodies, hanging there. And so I know from his experiences, and he talks about that I think today, and also Jackie Gleason with President Nixon is at an Air Force base in Florida. And Nixon took him in, Jackie Gleason, his buddy, they were good buddies, took him in and showed him some bodies of ETs that they had in a cooler also. They had these, frozen bodies of these ETs that they kept. but I never heard of any of them. I heard of a couple of live ETs that they had out west, out in those Area 51 or whatever, EB or whatever. But they could they extract information from them? Could they be trading off technology, Dr. Rogers?
Well, I have heard stories similar to that. However, those stories, to my knowledge, are um, conjecture. So, you know, uh, nobody ever briefed me on whether Richard Nixon showed anybody any alien bodies. So that's not something I could even address. I mean, that's like asking me, what does the inside of the Kremlin look like? Well, I have no idea. I've never been there.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the kinds of questions that if you ask me, I'm not going to have any answer because I know nothing about it.
Okay, I'll just testing to see if you did hear about it or know about it, because I would accept your word. I think you're a very honest person, and you're also a very professional person. Also, you still keep your profession of secrecy up. Uh, let's get into the big topic of today: 3AI Atlas. You had a very good talk on TikTok and other channels, and you described it. Could you please tell my audience about what you talked about, Dr. Rogers?
Certainly. Well, when we look at the chemical signatures, and so when we use the Hubble Space Telescope, when we use Earthbound telescopes, when we use the James Webb telescope, we can get electronic information that will give us signatures of what kind of chemicals are there. We can tell if there's water. We can tell if there's CO2. We can see if there's CO, carbon monoxide. We can see if there's iron. We can see if there's nickel. We can see if there's chromium. And so we can do spectrographic analysis and say, okay, here are the chemicals that we are seeing when we examine this 3I atlas. And so when we look at the chemical signatures, we found something very strange. In the universe, whenever a big star explodes and it produces iron, it's also going to produce nickel. There are only a couple of protons difference um, in their nuclear structures. So whenever these are produced, you're going to have a whole range of these metals that are all produced simultaneously. So whenever we look at an asteroid, a comet, the planet Earth, the moon, uh, stars, we always see uh, characteristic signatures of what elements they are made of. Well, when we look at any common satellite, such such as a comet or an asteroid that was made by the solar system itself, not man-made, what we're going to see is there's going to be iron in it, and there's going to be nickel, there's going to be all kinds of other elements there. And so we have lots and lots and lots of metallic signatures on what we expect to see in a comet. Well, when we look at the 3I Atlas, one of the things we should see is a whole bunch of iron, because iron is one of the more common metals found throughout the universe. It's long lasting and persists. When we look at the iron for 3I Atlas, it's not there.
Hmm.
So that is very curious. So if we say, well, maybe it's just all ice, so there wouldn't be any metallic signatures. Well, when we look for the nickel signatures, we see all kinds of nickel, and not just plain nickel, but nickel alloys. So we are seeing lots and lots of nickel alloys, but we're seeing no iron. Now then, if you look at the space shuttle, if you look at the Hubble Space Telescope, if you look at the Voyager 1, if you look at the Voyager 2, if you look at the New Horizons spacecraft, what you're going to see is that when we are creating our spacecraft, we're going to try to do it in um, the most effective manner possible. So, strength to weight ratio is important. The tolerance to the radiation in space is going to be important. Uh, we will not use iron in our spacecraft because it is not useful for spacecraft that we're going to send into space.
Mm-hmm.
So we will separate the iron from the nickel through a laborious process of manufacturing. When we get the pure nickel, now we're going to use special manufacturing techniques to create the specific alloys that we want, by which we can create special lightweight satellites that will be resistant to radiation in space and all of these kind of things. So it needs to be very space friendly. So when we create these kind of chemicals that are very space friendly, this is what we build our spacecraft from. Now then, if you imagine that the Voyager 1 or Voyager 2 eventually somewhere goes to another star and enters their solar system, as it becomes exposed to their star, and there is a race of intelligent beings, and they see this thing that is entering uh, 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 the area of space around their star, and they begin to monitor it. They're going to see, hey, they've got nickel alloys in this thing. Are they going to see any iron? No, it's not a natural process. We intentionally took the iron out and used the nickel because the nickel was the type of metallic alloys we wanted to use to create our spacecraft. So if that's what we would do, that's what they are going to detect. So when we look at 3I Atlas and we say, oh, it's just a regular old comet, and we look at the amount of iron and we look at the amount of nickel, there should be relative uh, comparisons between the amount of iron and the amount of nickel. That is not at all what we see. We're not seeing iron compounds, but what we are seeing are the same kind of nickel um, percentages and alloys that we would have used if that was going to be something that we were going to manufacture as some kind of a base or operating system on a naturally occurring comet. So when we add our touches to it, we are going to change the natural characteristics, and we are going to see entirely different chemical signatures coming from what we manipulated. Well, when we look at 3I Atlas, we are seeing the same type of manipulated chemical signatures as if we had done this ourselves. This is not normal. The chemistry doesn't lie.
Mm-hmm. Now, how about the age? They're saying that this thing could be 1 billion years old. And we talked, Dr. Rogers, prior to the show started, that this could, we mentioned it could be a big comet and maybe like we've seen in some of these sci-fi movies. They dug out these big asteroids and they put a ship in the center of it, like could be a Trojan horse. I mean, is that possible, Dr. Rogers?
Well, all we can say is that we are seeing evidence of manufactured materials. Now, then the age is guesswork. We can study uh, its past, where it's coming from, where it's going to, and we can make sort of educated guesses as to how old it is. But without a sample, there's no way for us to tell, how old is this?
Mm-hmm.
We can't do carbon 14 dating on it and figure out how old it is. So there's lots and lots and lots of speculation about all of these different kinds of things. And so astronomers, astrophysicists are arguing about all these different kinds of things. But to my mind, I just skip all of that. Okay, you can argue how old it is. It's within 5 degrees of the ecliptic plane of our solar system. Wow, that's very unusual. It's going to pass three of our um, planets. That's very unusual. But those are all the kind of things that we can speculate about. But we don't have any hard evidence of whether or not somebody actually sent it. But when we look at the chemistry, we can see, okay, there's evidence that manufactured materials are on this thing. So I can't say who did it, when they manufactured it, why they manufactured it, or anything else. But the chemical signatures we're seeing are consistent with manufactured materials. And that's not normal.
Right. They say there's a lot of off gases that it puts off, and now it's
Well,
dumping a lot of.
there always will be, and there's been some very unusual ones.
Yeah.
The amount of CO2 was initially sky high compared to what we would have expected. But uh, we're guessing as to what this is because we've never seen one like this. So we don't know what kind of star it developed around or what kind of um, circumstances it has passed through in traveling through interstellar space. But we know how stars manufacture iron. We know how stars manufacture nickel. We don't have to guess about that. So that's why I decided I'm not going to argue any of the other anomalies. I'm just going to stick to the chemistry
Mm-hmm.
of the nickel alloys and complete absence of iron.
And I tell you what, Doctor Rogers, you gave the most sober, I guess, details. And I saw your show on TikTok and everything, and you gave some, I guess, you put a little sanity into this whole thing because there's people all over the internet are saying all kinds of stuff. They're saying that okay, there are some scientists actually arguing back and forth. I know a couple of scientist friends of mine had on my show, and they tell me it's definitely a comet. Avi Loeb is saying it's 50-50. It could be ET oriented technology. But I hear these people saying, well, if it's coming from another galaxy, it's interstellar, and there could be different chemical makings in the other galaxies than what we have here. Like we're carbon based, and we mentioned iron, of course, is carbon, and and other
No, iron is not carbon.
not okay. Well, it's a
Now then, you can have like carbon to carbon bonds and dicarbide bonds are seen throughout the universe. CO is carbon and oxygen, which is carbon monoxide.
mhm.
CO2 is carbon and two molecules of oxygen. So we also see methane, ethane. We see uh, volatile organic chemicals, even for the asteroids and comets of our own solar system. Uh, when you look at things like this, these are the elements that allow life to form.
Hmm.
Now, then I believe in God, and I believe that God made the entire universe. And everywhere we look, we see the building elements by which life could form. So I believe that God created life within the universe.
Sure.
And when we look at our galaxy, there's 400 billion stars, and every one of them has the same set of chemical elements that we're seeing. So there are nucleotides, there are amino acids, there are prebiotic chemicals present throughout the entire universe. So if we look to see how might life form, God created the universe so that it would generate life.
Hmm.
And we can see that in the chemical signatures of uh, asteroids, comets, planets, and everything else. So that's a whole different kind of argument than what we're talking about with Three Eye Atlas.
There's also some scientists who are saying that they have pictures of the front of the comet having light, emitting light, and it should be in the back of a comet with a tail. You know, the comet should have a tail. And they say actually, and I don't know if any of this is real, they said that they saw it coming close to the sun and they shot some kind of a, I guess, plasma energy at the sun, or they were getting plasma energy. All kinds of jokester on, I guess, on the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Well, there was a pre-tail that was preceding it, but now then we also saw elements of light
hmm.
that were not consistent with it being deflected by a rock. However, if there are chromium alloys, nickel alloys on uh, Three Eye Atlas, and as it turns, the sun reflects off those metals. You just think about what happens if uh, you're at a football stadium and somebody takes a piece of metal and reflects the sunlight into the eyes of the opposing quarterback,
Hmm.
just because they can take the metal and deflect the light. They can redirect the light and do something with it. Well, if the light is being deflected by nickel alloy materials, that's going to be an entirely different kind of reflection than if it's reflecting off plain old rocks.
I've been listening to some scientists who are saying that how come NASA's so quiet? How come NASA's not saying anything? I don't know if you can add anything to that, Dr. Rogers, but a lot of them are saying, "Where's NASA? How come NASA's not doing anything?"
Well, I'm going to look at this from an entirely different standpoint than most everyone else you talk to, because I know what happens inside NASA. NASA operates on funding. Funding occurs by what Congress is going to authorize NASA to do. If NASA starts getting into all kinds of controversial aspects, that could affect what the congressmen and senators are going to vote for the budget of NASA.
I see.
So the people who run NASA are worried about the budget. So if there is something controversial about us going to the moon, and it looks like one of the rocket elements that we have spent $2 billion to produce is not going to be effective in getting us to the moon, they're going to kill the program because they're not going to spend more money on it.
Hmm.
NASA does not get money from Congress to talk about controversial subjects. They're worried about funding. So NASA will talk about funding. And if you're going to talk about other controversial subjects, they're not going to bring up anything that could affect what Congress gives to NASA in the way of funding, because they're competing with the Department of Defense, the Department of War now. They're competing with the Department of Labor for funds. They're competing with every aspect of the national budget. Where are we going to spend our money? Well, NASA wants to preserve as much of the money as they get. So they're not going to create controversies.
Mhm. What about the rovers? They said the rovers got several good shots or pictures of it passing near Mars, 3I Atlas, and they put those pictures on the internet. But I can't believe any of those pictures. So many of them are just disinformation, misinformation. People just playing things for clickbait, and that's why I said you bring such a sobriety to all this junk that's on the internet right now. So I appreciate that. But did they get on the rovers? Did they get pictures of the 3I Atlas, Dr. Rogers?
Uh, well, unfortunately, they have not discussed it with me. They haven't discussed it with much anybody.
Yeah.
You also have to remember that we're in a government shutdown.
Yes.
But uh, uh, let me sort of discuss it in this fashion. If uh, the government is not wanting NASA to discuss topics, and NASA is concerned, if we discuss this topic, will our budget get cut? What do you think the NASA managers are going to do? They're not going to discuss that topic because they are worried about their funding. In the movie The Right Stuff, they bring up you know this sort of topic, and they say, do you know what sends your rockets into space? And they start to explain fuel, and they say, no, funding
Mhm.
sends your rockets into space.
Yeah, it's all about the money.
No Buck Rogers, no bucks for the space program.
Right.
So NASA is more concerned about funding than they are promoting any particular controversial subject that the government doesn't want them to discuss.
How about the European? I guess they have, telescopes, and also China. They both kind of chimed in and said they had some pictures, and they do. Have you heard of any of the pictures? Have you seen any of the
Um,
Rogers?
yeah, their information seems to be much more controversial, and they have some information that does make it look as though the trajectory,
Yeah.
the flight path, the speed has been altered, and there have been forms of activity that we would not expect from 3I Atlas.
Right.
But um, the evidence is small, and guess what? European Space Agency has to worry about funding too. So if they get a bunch of people ticked off at them, they're going to say, okay, well, we'll cut that out. We need a new gas pipeline to the North Sea. We'll just take money from the European Space Agency and put it into a pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
All government agencies are concerned with what are their budgets going to be and what will affect them.
Right. Now you talked about speed for AI Atlas. Uh, they said it goes 150,000 miles an hour, and then it slows down and it speeds up. A comet doesn't do that, does it, Doctor Rogers? So it doesn't
Uh,
slow down.
not to significant degrees, not in the fashion that we have clues that this one has. What generally whenever you talk about something passing through the solar system, you're going to be talking about the gravitational trajectory. If you pass a planet, the effect of that planet will slightly alter the path of the orbit of whatever it is you're studying. as it is nearing the sun's huge gravity is going to grab it and speed it up.
Right.
And there's going to be a gravitational constant that's going to be there. But then if you also have uneven heating and there's some outgassing, it may flip it one way or another, and it can cause minor trajectory changes and maybe even minor speed changes. But we have patterns of what we expect to see. And when we see something that is not operating within the expectations of what we have, that makes scientists scratch their head and say, man, what was that?
Yeah.
And so on 3i Atlas, we're scratching our head and saying, what was that?
Hmm.
Because it's just not seeming to operate the way that we wanted it to operate when we first saw
Okay.
it. If we could have described everything about what we expected it to do, and then it did all of those things we expected, we would be very confident and say, oh, well, we know exactly what that is.
Hmm.
But when we made our projections of what it was supposed to do, it doesn't seem to be exactly following the pattern that we expected it to. And so that's what's causing the difficulties. It doesn't seem to be behaving properly. So if it's not behaving properly, we got to ask why. The problem is we're only going to get one shot at this. It's traveling so fast and passing through our solar system so quickly, we're never going to be able to get all of the details that we need to make definitive statements about what this is. So 30 years after this thing is long gone, we're still going to have scientists arguing about it.
Yeah. Uh, let's bring this up to date. They said the 29th, 30th, 31st, and probably the 1st of November, this 3i Atlas is going to go around the back of the sun and come out on the other side where we can visually see it again. And they're saying that it's going to change trajectory by about 3 degrees, and that'll put it right directly towards our moon. That's what one scientist is saying. I don't know how.
Well, there are all kinds of scientists making all kinds of proposals.
Mm-hmm.
And I can assure you from the history of scientific proposals, 99% of them are going to be wrong. Um, when we make scientific theories, they last for a while, and then we learn more information. So we say, okay, we have to get rid of that theory. Let's develop a new theory. You know, there was a famous physicist, I believe in the year 1900, who made the comment that we would laugh at today that said, everything that is discoverable in physics has been discovered. All we are going to do now is make better calculations.
Mm-hmm.
5 years later, the photoelectric effect is found, and that gives us clues to quantum physics. Um, Special relativity occurs, and that gives us insights into general relativity and the standard model. Uh, what we believe today is completely different from what that guy in 1900 said, but what he said was wrong. And so most of the time we try to create theories and then test and prove those theories. Most of the theories are going to be wrong. And so science has great difficulty trying to come up with the truth of the matter. And so science weaves all over the place as it goes along. And that's why it is so difficult.
Now, I'm going to
But
ask this question, Doctor. That I know you don't like conjecture. You don't like making predictions, probably because you're a factual person. Okay, when this thing comes out around the sun, can you tell us what we can maybe expect, or you don't want to go there?
what I can tell you what I expect. I expect that the solar heating, solar radiation, and solar gravitation will have made changes to what 3i Atlas is. As it comes out on the other side, there's going to be some modifications, but it is still in a hyperbolic trajectory, and it's going to pass Saturn and then leave our solar system never to return.
Hmm.
And so on its way out, we will try to learn some additional details uh, compared to what we learned as it came in. But we've probably had some of the best opportunities to learn about 3i Atlas already. And so the information we're going to learn as it passes outside of the sun and leaves our solar system is probably going to be less effective than what we've been able to do already.
Some scientists say that this is a probe by an intelligent race that sent a probe in, and it just going by our planets and summing us up in this galaxy. Uh, there's also they talk about what was the difference between Amua and 3i Atlas, Dr. Jones?
Uh, Size was different. The configuration was different. The composition was different. So you're talking about apples and pineapples.
Mm-hmm.
So they were both from interstellar space, but the similarities um, are uh, very interesting from the standpoint of, okay, we're learning from them. But to say that we can say all of this about Oumuamua and we can say all of this other stuff about 3i Atlas, there are some anomalous findings,
Mm-hmm.
but to stretch it beyond there is speculation.
Right. I think a lot of scientists are speculating, and I've had a couple of scientists I told you said, Dave, don't call it an ET ship, and it's comet. It's a comet, okay? Don't go there with it. But it's 50-50. I think they're like Avi Loeb said, it's 40-60 that it's ET related, and there's a possibility of it just passing us by, even if they are ETs, just passing us by and taking a look at us and going on. Is that a possibility too, Dr. Joe?
Well, imagine this. As our capabilities increase, we decide we want to mine an asteroid. There's lots of valuable minerals on this asteroid. So we send a spacecraft to it, and it's a natural asteroid. But as soon as we start monkeying around with it and we start mining the elements from it, we're going to change the characteristic of that asteroid.
Mm-hmm.
If someone sees that asteroid after we've been altering it, it's going to look different than a natural asteroid. It started out as a natural asteroid, but once we started monkeying around with it, it doesn't look like a normal asteroid because we have been doing things to it.
Okay. I'm going to ask you one last question, and I'll let you go.
Okay.
This what we've been having all kinds of UFO sightings, UAP sightings all over the world, beginning with the drones about a year ago, and on. We've been seeing a lot more. Has there anybody or any experts that you've talked to uh, ever said why this is happening, why we're getting so much attention from UAPs and UFOs, Dr. Gerald?
Well, when when I was on with the Aero deputy, former deputy director on Friday night, he said, we don't have any evidence of anything. But at the same time, we had our airspace violated at Langley Air Force Base. We could not control our own airspace.
Right.
We had to move our F 22s for their protection because we did not know what's going on. If we knew what was going on, we wouldn't have had to move the F 22s. So the US Air Force did not know what was going on. And we moved the F 22s because we can't say what was happening.
Right.
So if somebody comes on the internet and says, I know everything about everything, great. That's why you're on the internet,
Yeah,
but nobody's going to listen to you.
yeah.
So
I know
uh,
the government
that's
said,
that's my final word about that.
yeah,
There's lots of people on the internet saying lots of stuff, and most of it is wrong.
yeah. The government said that they're friendly and FAA approved drones, and so that's what they said, and they just dropped it. Both Biden and Trump said the same exact same thing about all these drones and these sightings. That they're
If we can't control our own airspace over Langley Air Force Base, they're not friendly and happy.
Yeah. So somebody's lying. Okay, I lied about one last question. I want tell us what you heard from one of the astronauts that you still remember today as being a statement that you can't forget.
Okay. Um, you asked one more question, and unfortunately, I'm not going to answer
Oh,
it.
okay.
If if I told what I have heard astronauts say and I used their names, they would immediately have to say, I never said that
Yeah, you'd be fired.
because that's not what you do. In 1992, when I saw the flying saucer being tested, I wasn't telling anybody for anything. If I had gone back to my colonel and said, "Hey, sir, I just saw a flying saucer being tested at Cape Canaveral," that would have been the end of my career. So there's a good reason that astronauts and military personnel do not feel comfortable discussing these kind of topics, especially while they're still on active duty.
Yeah.
So
And you're an honest,
that's
you don't,
that's the final statement.
yeah, you don't want to break their trust. I mean, you're an honest person and you stay as a professional. And I've enjoyed this whole
Yeah,
thing.
but there are stories.
Yeah, yeah, I know there would be, but we don't want to get you out there on a limb. But Dr. Gregory Rogers, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed being.
Pleasure, and it's been an honor for you to be on the show. I really appreciate it. Uh,
Thank you very much.
you are really hitting a lot of other YouTubes. You got a lot of YouTubes. I looked those up, and you've been on TikTok, and you're about 1 million views. I think you're talking about. So
Yeah.
yeah, you're. I mean, people are liking what you're saying because it.
Well, it's a whole lot different when someone who really knows their subject is talking about their subject
Mm-hmm,
than when people who barely understand a subject try to speculate as to what something means and they tell you all kinds of things that are incorrect.
right.
So I'm going to stick to what I know and I'm going to tell what I know. And so
Okay.
I'm
Great.
going to leave it at that.
That's great. And I don't mind you not answering a couple of questions that I have asked because that's part of what I do and it's part of what you have to do is for
Yeah.
your honor and honoring other people. Dr. Gregory Rogers, thank you so much for being on the show. This is Dave Emmons signing off on Strange Reality. Thank you for listening in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.